Hey, welcome back, Gurus. My name's Craig Finley. Today we're going to go over a SOAR installation overview. So we're going to talk about the many different methods or options that you kind of look at before you start an installation. We're going to walk through a regular install of the product, and we'll talk here about updating, networking, things of those nature. All right, let's get into it. All right, so we're going to start here first. We're going to talk about the files that are actually used to install the appliance, and it can go in really I guess you say three methods but two flavors. So let's just talk about those first. Now the first one we have here is you can import it directly into your VMware infrastructure, and for that we deliver an OVA file, right? So the OVA is the open appliance format. That's the method that we'll be using today, where we'll take that file and we'll actually import it into a VMware server, and that's going to kick off our install. So when we're using an OVA file, what I want you to consider here is within the OVA, everything is built to our software standards, right? So we're using the proper libraries and everything. There's no need, if you will, to go out to any additional repo managers for the maintenance or the security updates of the core OS. So our core operating system there is RHEL 7. I'll be migrating to RHEL 8 shortly, but it's important to understand that from a product management, a stability, development type of environment, where you want to have packages on there that you know are tested and are going to work well. All right, so we give you an install file here that is in the OVA. Same thing here with the run files. It is like the core install for the application. And then we apply updates. So there are different types of updates that will be applied based on your scenario that you're using. So with an OVA, you're going to get your RHEL system pretty much delivered to you within that package. Now, if that doesn't suit your needs, right? Because when you're importing a VM, it usually comes in with certain size and specifications, disk size, things like that, already pre-configured. But there's sometimes that people just have special needs and they want to do things a little bit differently from what's pre-packaged in the OVA. So in those cases, they would take the second option there, is where they would bring up the RHEL Enterprise Linux version that is appropriate for what you're running on here. Again, I stated earlier, currently 7, will be migrating to 8, right? So if you check this video out in the future, you want to make sure or confirm that your underlying system would be the right version. But for the install in that second variant there, you would basically go through and set up your machine, and then you would run the command here, sudo bash, and then the name of the run file, right? And so from this run file, the same run file that we use for updates, you could actually do an installation of the package from that. So we refer to that method as BYOL, or bring your own Linux, but we're specifically stating that RHEL is the supported version there. And you're able to install it with other options, a little bit more complexity. But again, same rule applies there. If this RHEL box is being used for a lot of other things, then these other applications may require additional update or repo packages to be downloaded and maintained. And we're going to suggest that if you do that installation, you do it on a dedicated machine, because our packages, our update packages, have been tested, certified, QA development. That whole process is going through. So, it is not a good idea to try to mix that. Now, the third option would be if you are installing this in some sort of government or secure environment. So, for the here in the United States, we have FIPS 140. 140-2 is one of the baseline standards here. And so if we were going to do that, as a part of your install, you would contact support. Support would give you a package that basically had all of the FIPS libraries, already enabled within the system, so that would be something that you would reach out and get. But it's basically, if it were delivered to you in said format, all of the underlying OS would be all set up and prepared to go for you. So that's the those again are the three options there. There are certain use cases for each one. For today's video, we're going to take the easier route and just go with the OVA. So what we're going to accomplish today is we're going to start with the OVA. We're going to import it into an ESX server, set it up, configure it, network it, and then we're going to concentrate a little bit on the update files as well. So that's our task layout. Let's dive into it. All right, so here we are logged into an ESX server here, ESXi server. Sorry, and we're going to create the virtual machine here. So we're going to specify and go and select create register VM. So we're going to select deploy virtual machine from our OVA OVF. Click next, and we're just going to simply call this SOAR install. SOAR install. And the next thing we have here, we are prompted to drag and drop the file over to it. So we're going to return to our window here, which you cannot see. It's off screen. Alright, I'm just going to pick this file up here and drop it into the window. And there we are. So from there, with the OVA file, it's basically a template, shows how the drive should come out, where we're going to store it. So this is the storage on the server. I'm just going to tell you that my SSD are a lot faster than my old school hard drives there, so I'm going to put it on the faster drive. Click next. All right, there's an end user license agreement. We scroll down here to the bottom and then select I agree in the lower right. And from there, the import begins. Now, a couple of things to note here. You know, when you saw this, because all of those things were defined within the template, you know, you didn't see any options for resizing anything, resizing any partitions or anything like that. You are able to manipulate the CPUs and processors after the install with the OVA, but you know, that partitioning, the disk partitioning size, things like that, it's not possible from OVA. So that's something to be aware of. We get here to the deployment options. I'm going to stick this on the main network here. And disk provisioning, I'm going to choose thin. Thin makes it grow to its maximum size as needed. It just doesn't have to chew up so many resources or pre-allocate the drive before. So with all of that laid out, you know, I've got a warning here, do not refresh while being deployed. We're going to hit finish and we're going to watch this on the progress bar. So it's basically going to create that repository, and then it'll bring up the space there for that particular application. All right, so now that our machine is properly loaded there, next thing we're going to do is we are going to connect to a console here so that we can complete the install. So I'm going to launch a remote console here just for simplicity. Because I prefer to use the VMware workstation for the remote console. Alright, so we see that as it's firing up now, it's going to actually decompress all of the different packages that need to be done for the installation. This is very similar to what you would see if you were logging on with sudo. Starting the install package from bash. Sudo bash run from the .run file. So you see here at the top of the line, it's already logged on as root, generated SSH keys, and now it's going through installing the database, all of the subsystems, everything that the application is going to depend on to run. All right. Next step here is to set the password for the root user. And for the Res admin account. All right, so the next thing. All right, so the next thing we have here is the system is prompting us to, you want to take this DHCP address. And I'm going to say no here so that we can configure it statically. Just so anytime this machine comes up, it's usually going to be a static configuration so that we'll know exactly where it is. So I'm going to type in static. Going to put in the desired IP address, which will be, we're going to go with 192.168.2.195. The other 5 here for this instance. And the desired gateway. So this is just standard networking here that you will put in for your system. And then for our net mask, we got a C mask. So our goal here is to just get some basic connectivity. And then from there, we're going to go with the, once we get base connected, we'll reconnect to it with PuTTY. So I'm just going to call this mpmg.local. Actually, we'll call it. I'm just going to call this irgurus dot local dot LAN. All right, good enough. So just one quick look. Check everything over, click yes. It's basically going to update these network settings. It'll reboot. So when it reboots, it'll enable or start whatever services needed to be started there as well. All right, so the system is back up. It is booted, zooted, responding to pings. So now we're going to make a connection to it with PuTTY. Now, coming out of the VMware or the vSphere or the client PuTTY is useful when we get to the step of applying the license. So I'm going to start here by logging out as the Res admin user and enter the password. And enter the password. All right, there we are. Okay, so since we started from the OVA, we have our Res admin, we have our everything is set up with the utilities. So the next thing that we want to do for some good successful networking here is to set up our date and time. We want our date and time to be sync. It's an important feature to do that, to pull from some sort of NTP server. It helps with the synchronization of the app host and many different applications, the events, the timestamps that go on to cases, things like that. So it's good to have those time zone settings set up. So let's get those configured. So we're going to do the standard Linux command there for time date control. Start here with list time zones. So you would actually get a list there of what time zone that you're in. I know that here in Atlanta my time zone is America, New York, so I'm going to just go ahead and paste that in. And Put in the password for ResAdmin. And we should now be all set for that date and time to be in sync. All right. So there are many different services that run things within our environment there. One of the core ones for the application is the resilient messaging service. It is suggested, not 100% critical, but after setting that date and time zone, you can actually go and restart this service, and that service would pick up on it. But more than likely, after doing your initial configurations and things of that nature, there will be some sort of reboot or something that is going to occur. So we'll wait for that command to complete. Just as a, extra information for you and a good practice. So it is completed. And I think one of the common practices there to have some sort of directory where you store important files. So what I'm going to do here is make their updates, and it is here in this updates directory that I am going to place some of the other files that we're going to use. So I'm going to use a file transfer application and transfer those in the background. I'm going to pause momentarily while I get that done. And we're back. All right, so now that the file transfer is completed, we want to cd into the updates folder we created, and we're just going to do a ls here. We're going to just talk about this for a while. So basically we have done the install on version 48, right? So there's like the version number is the first digit you'll see here. There is a major release and a minor release. So we're make you understand that we're installed at version 48. Now there could be hot fixes or things that would come out along the way. So we have a 48.1, 48.2, and then there are minor fixes there in the third digit. So for every version we have here, such as we have 48.1.7, we have a security appliance updates. 48.1.7, 48.2.16, same thing there. So the basic install files are the .run files, SOAR-version major minor .run, and the appliance updates. This is more or less, think of this as the repository, a self-contained repository that has all of the update packages that would be needed to run a particular version. All right, so we have installed at version 48, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick the highest version here of a 48.2, and then I am going to apply any security updates that we may have there. So I'm going to apply 48.2.16. So let's just check here, see if we got the most up-to-date version. So to do that, we would do sudo bash SOAR-48.2.16.run. And the sud command does not exist, so we'll go ahead and fix that. Sudo bash SOAR-48.16.run looks good. And and this time we've got it right. All right, so it is. Enter our password there. It's going to verify the integrity, etc. So it's going to go through. It's going to do a pre-checks, check for adequate disk space. It's going to look for adequate memory and everything for the upgrade. It decompresses the package. It goes through. It's going to check the version. So we see here we've got the old version of 48.0.8259. Here's the new version that we're going to be updated to. Now, when you're in the console, you can always go to the help and about screen to see what version you are, so that you know exactly which package that you would want to install. It also sets up a backup here. It writes it to the crypt directory, so you have a crypt db underscore restore points before upgrade. It's kind of like a rolling or incremental update that it would actually do there. New install, we don't have a whole bunch that we really need to worry about here with the backup, but it's important that you understand that as a part of this installation process, that it does actually back everything up before it goes through and does the updating of the system. So shortly we're going to have the base version installed at 48.2.16, and our next step is going to be install those security updates. So we're going to pause here and allow that process to complete. All right, so now that we have that portion done, the next part is to do the security updates. So again, we're looking for 48.2.16. So it is sudo, make sure we spelled it right this time, bash SOAR appliance security update 48.2.16. Now, if you had a version mismatch there and you had a higher version already installed, when it does that check before it starts, it would actually just stop the installation. It says, no, you're not going to be able to downgrade. You're going to be you're already at this version. So we got 48.2.16.run, and we're going to put in the password. And what you'll see that's a little bit different here is you'll see it kind of like unpack those repositories for the security updates. So as we talked about it before, think about the development process for an application. There are certain packages that are used and set up and tested within QA, and they are the supportable versions of the code, right? So when you're using the OVA, you're hitting these appliances, you're pretty much in a much safer zone. If you were doing, as we said at the beginning, bring your own Linux type of install there, to keep it in a supportable position, you want to use these security updates here, right? Because it's basically saying that these packages, these libraries, things that are in use here have been tested and certified to work with this product. Pretty standard practice across all software vendors. And it's just to be sure if you're doing those things that you're going to have it in the most supportable state. So in this particular one here, we have some kernel updates, and we're asking for a reboot. So we're going to restart this system. I'm going to pause here and come back when it's back up. One quick thing that you could do here when you are doing this, if you've installed from the OVA and you need to switch to root, you can go sudo-i for the interactive there. It'll automatically take you to root. So from there, we can insert the restart command. All right. So now we've got that part set up. The next thing we want to do is to start to set up and configure things in our system. Now, before we start to configure things in our system, it'll be time for us to go ahead and apply our license file. So you will take your license file. There's actually two ways that you could do the license file. One means would be you can cut and paste it into the terminal. So you may find that using a terminal emulator or something like I'm using here will allow that, right? Because I couldn't do that through the EXXI console or anything. So that's why it was important for me to connect via terminal. The other way is you can actually have it read that data from a file. So our next step here will be to enter that from the file. All right, so method one, we would go sudo license dash import. Now, we're not going to go completely through with this method, just because I am not going to paste my license into the screen. But you'll see that once it accepts that command, prepares for that license import, it will say, please enter or paste the license file. Now I'm going to break out of there. And I'm actually going to do the same command there, but I'm going to go dash file. And then I'm going to specify the file, which is, in this case, is in the updates folder, and we have a file irgurus.txt. So this is where the license file is actually stored there in the system. So I am going to hit enter the password if necessary. Looks like I got it fast enough, and it is going to attempt to update that file, update the license from there. All right, so our system is now licensed and ready to go. So we see here that it displays the information here about the license. One thing that we could do, if you had your system up and you needed to take a look at that license, one of the main commands that we use for all of our configurations here is resutil. So it would be sudo resutil license. There I go again, leaving the O off of sudo. Sudo resutil license, and we click this here, and it'll show us that same display momentarily. Now, as you know, you have different types of different products there, different modules, if you will, that are within the product. So anything that you have enabled there, it will show up as true on your license. All right, let's move on. Now that the license is applied, is basically the web interface is now enabled. If we didn't have a license on the system, you know, we would have gone and hit a screen that says that the system did not have a valid license and apply it as the administrator. So we've got that part set up. If you were now bringing this into your environment, a more secure fashion, before you set up or configure anything, now would be a good time to set up any certificates or any certificate authorities for any other type of communication that you would have going back and forth to your system. So with that said, the next thing we're going to do here is we're going to get ready to create our org. Now, an org is a boundary within our system of the different types of permissions and controls. It's kind of like creating a partition, if you will, in the Postgres database for a particular company or organization or something that you're managing here on your system. And when you create that org, you're going to use a certain command to build it. You're going to specify that you are creating a new org. You're going to specify the user account that you are going to apply to that org. So what it actually does, as a step there for the setting up of that portion, you're going to specify some of these things on the command line. You do have the ability to do a lot from the command line. You can create groups, you can add users into roles and things of that nature. But because we're starting from a basically blank system, we need to set up the fundamentals of the structure and then expand outward. All right, so after any particular certificates or anything needed to be imported, the next step would be to set up the notification address. Now, this is what the system is going to use if you send out any notifications or any invitations, such as if a task were assigned to a user and it came from a particular email address. We would set that up with the resutil SMTP edit command. Basically, when you're setting up the notifications, regardless of the number of orgs that you may have on your system, there's one SMTP address that is used for relaying messages. A message could be a notification such as a task is assigned or a task is overdue, or that one user in the platform sends a note to another as an actionable item. Anything that the user has enabled for any type of notifications to come by, it'll use this standard email address as where it is inviting from. So it's important to have this set up because we're going to create our master administrator account, our primary admin account from the CLI, and anything created from the CLI will be that admin. After that account has been created and within the web interface, we can actually send out invitations to the user. So we like to go through the process of setting things up, defining groups, and then sending the invite for the user with the group memberships already done. So having this email set up is a pretty important step there. So we're going to copy the command and paste it in here, and we'll talk about it quickly. So this is the email address that it will come from. When it shows up with the name there, say IBM SOAR Lab notifications, it's going to the host of 2.27. Basically set up a local mail server here as an open relay over port 25. But if we were authenticating this, it would be over 587, and you would have to put in the certificate. Because this is just a basic open relay here, we have no start TLS, right? So we're telling this command to not start the TLS. But if your mail server needed that authentication, it would hit that by default. And then the last part there is the user SOAR at notifications. So that is the account that we are using to log on to the system. So I'm going to enter here, put in the password. Enter it. Let's try that again. All right, that's taking longer, so that means it's running. And if it verifies all of those parameters, now it's going to ask for the password for the user. Right, and those values are now set up for that mail to be relayed. Outstanding. And so now that that is done, the next step is to test the configuration that we just entered there by sending a test email. So that's going to be sudo resutil SMTP test dash email and momentarily we will know if that email was able to be relayed successfully. All right, so successful relay. If there were any problems with it, of course you would just go back and use the SMTP edit command to re-enter those credentials and make sure that what is stored and going to be used can successfully connect to the server. All right, let's move on. All right, so let's execute the command to create the org. So again, it's going to be sudo resutil new user, because we're also going to create the user at the same time. We're going to use the switch create org. Dash email So the email address here will be cfin@ars.com. That's first. Just gonna add myself. And quick review there. We are creating a new user, which is cfin@our.gurus. Your email address is really the key there. And then these are just additional information you see in the console. With the create org, we're specifying the org to be our gurus. Hopefully I typed everything correct. Let's see what happens. Got a long pause, no error message, so these things are magically happening in the background. Again, creating an account from the CLI automatically becomes a master administrator. So it's going to be a master administrator and be tied to this org. All right, specify the password there. Apparently the password is not long enough. Alrighty. And now we have a now we have our new org set up. So this is pretty good. So now that this is all set up and populated for us, we can now access this by our web interface. All right, and we're back. All right, so next thing we want to talk about here is setting the base URL. Whenever you have like an email or a notification or something like that that is sent out from the SOAR platform, by default in the install, it doesn't know exactly what your domain is, so it doesn't set that up within the email notifications. So we took a look at an email that we have here on the system from earlier. So this would be an invitation that went out here to join a particular org to a particular email address and user. And right now it says 192.168.2.180. All right, 192.168.2.180. If we want to change that, we're going to go to our terminal and we're going to use the config set parameter. So let's just do that here. We'll activate a terminal. Yay. And we will SSH to our instances. All right. So to set that parameter so that it will show the way that we want it to, we are going to first enter the command config set, and config set is a there are actually two flavors there. There's config set and config get. So we're going to go with config get first, and we're going to do dash base URL. Now, config get is basically going to run that command and execute it and return the results of what is currently stored there on the system for us. The dash space URL says specifically we're looking for whatever is configured. All right, so we don't have anything set up there. So what we're going to do now is we're going to set it. So we're going to go sudo res util. We're going to change that to config set. Set the base URL. And it's going to be HTTPS let's just go with SOAR irgurus.com. And very shortly that will be set there on our system. And just to verify one more time, we do a config get. There we go. So there we go. Now that that portion is set up, we can move right into our next activity, which will be, all right, so the next thing we want to do now that we have that set up is we want to set up the syslog and the audit log. So we'll do a couple of things here for the syslog. Actually, let's go sudo-i, so we don't have to put this password in 54 times in one video. All right, so now we're going to go vi slash, let's see, our syslog dot conf, and we're looking for some specific lines here that we're going to uncomment. We're going to uncomment using UDP over port 14 and TCP over 514. And once we have that done, we restart the resilient, or I'm sorry, not the resilient, restart the syslog servers. So, system control, all right, there we go. Okay, with syslog now turned on, we are ready to enable the SOAR audit log messages. So the SOAR audit log messages go into a particular file called the client.log. To turn it on is pretty easy. We just go and enter the command sudo res util audit dash on, and once that's enabled, any audit messages about who's logging on to the system and things like that, they will go to the internal client.log, but they could also be forwarded to a SIM or something else, anything else that you want there. So as a matter of fact, we can go back to and we're basically going to go to the bottom of the file, and this entry here, I'm going to copy it, uncomment it, and we're going to send this to 192.168.2. 186, I think, is a host that could receive that message there. And then, of course, restart the 6-log service so that it picks up that change. So now anything that's happening on my system will be automatically logged internally to the client.log file. But by turning that additional switch on there, it's also going to the var log messages, right? So syslog enabled, audit turned on, audit is sending it over there, and it is also forwarding it now to a SIM. So I have extra layers there. All right, let's proceed.